plenary panel, and we are going to have three speakers. First, of course, are ladies, and the first lady is Nadège Ragaru, a historian and political scientist, and her current research centers on the cultural history of socialism in Bulgaria and Macedonia, as well as on the history and the historiography of the Holocaust in Southeast Europe. Nadège's topic was partially, I would say, discovered or announced in my reference to the Nice Circle, as she's also going to mention that film, but the official title of her paper is Socialism by Proxy, Negotiating Past and Present in the Figuration of the Jewish Catastrophe in Bulgaria and Yugoslavia in the late 1950s.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to take part in this very important conference. Yes, indeed, at the end of the 1950s, two movies were made that attempted to portray the Holocaust in Yugoslavia and in Bulgaria. Zvezdi, Sterne, a co-production between East Germany and Bulgaria, shot by Konrad Wolf on a script by Angel Wagenstein, premiered at the Cannes Movie Festival and was awarded a special prize of the jury. Deveti Krug by Franz Stieglitz was nominated for Best Foreign Film at the Oscar. As you all see, the two features are not devoid of resemblance. In fact, both try to present cinematic images of the Holocaust by relating the story of a platonic and doomed love between a young girl, a Jew, Ruth, in both film is her name, and a non-Jewish male, Ivo, a Croat, in Deveti Krug, and a German officer, Walter, in Zvezdi. In comparing those two movies, I would like to raise three sets of questions. The first one is related to the fact that for a long period of time, scholars have insisted on the relative silence over the Holocaust in the 1940s and 50s. Over the past year, though, it's become quite visible that a certain number of newsreels, documentary films, and movies were shot from the second half of the 1940s onwards that need to be further explored. So one question would be, by the end of the 1950s, is it possible to see the emergence of some kind of a common anti-fascist canon in the representation of the Holocaust that would bring together different cinematographies from what has been called Eastern Europe? But more precisely, what Holocaust and whose Holocaust is being depicted in those movies? To what extent is the Holocaust treated per se as the key event, or also offers a prism through which different countries are trying to negotiate their definition of the recent past, but also of the present and the presences of attempts at shaping socialism? So do we see a form of nationalization of the past in those movies? And the third question is, we're talking about the late 1950s. We're talking about a very important moment after the 10th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, After Night and Fog by Alain Resnais. Can we discern the appearance of certain shared transnational cultural idioms with regard to portraying the Holocaust? As you will notice, by trying to articulate past and present, national, Eastern European, and transnational dimensions, I will be making an argument that actually is not treating on par both movies. I've been working on Bulgaria for the past 20 years and had the opportunity to do research in the archives of the movie-making process and in the meetings of the Artistic Council. My knowledge of Yugoslav cinema and of Yugoslavia is much more limited. Therefore, I have decided to organize the presentation into three sections. I will first and foremost try to trace the origin of the Bulgarian-German co-production. Second, try to wonder about what kind of a reading of the war they're trying to negotiate. And as you will see, it's a pretty divisive understanding of what the war was about and how one might think about the Holocaust. And then in the third section, I will revert to Deveti Krug and try to wonder about some common ways of representing the Jewish catastrophe. So let us start about the fashioning of a socialist way of remembering the Holocaust. Before 1959, there had been numerous attempts at depicting the war, fascism, and anti-Semitism in what was to become East Germany. As you will hear from Gergana, Bulgaria's situation is different, and I will not ponder about it. But I want to insist on the fact that before the creation of East Germany, a series of films had been devoted to everyday fascism, to the long-term history of Germany. One of the key issues was, where exactly does Nazism come from? When does it start? How far back into history do we have to go? And they were also wondering about the existence of the potential collective form of responsibility. So these are three of the most famous movies: The Murderers Are Amongst Us, The Bloom Affair, Marriage in the Shadows. What is common about those feature films is that the directors and scriptwriters did not have to be commissioned to make the movies, unlike what some Western scholars have long asserted. They themselves either were Jews or had suffered from the war. Some of them had immigrated to the USSR and had returned after the war, trying to contribute to the liberation of Berlin. And they had a very intimate experience of the war and of persecution of the Jews. Another important feature is that at the time, they were targeting an all-German audience. In other words, the we was still a united we, all Germans together, which, as you will see, evolves over time, and especially in the 1950s. But besides the attempts at representing the Holocaust in East Germany, which actually went to a standstill in the early 1950s, as DEFA was strongly controlled by the Communist Party, and an anti-cosmopolitan campaign was launched. So there was a moment of a few years of silence. You have two personalities who did get committed to having Zvezdi shot as a movie. Those are Konrad Wolf and Angel Wagenstein. Both were born in the 1920s in left-wing Jewish families. Both had an experience of emigration. Angel Wagenstein's family left for France at the time of what is called in Bulgaria the White Terror, while Konrad Wolf was his family, Friedrich, his father, who was a very well-known also scriptwriter and dramatist, left for the USSR. Both got involved in the struggle against fascism and Nazism. What you see here is a very moving picture of Angel Wagenstein, the pink one above, when he was arrested by the Bulgarian police because he had taken part in sabotage actions. He was tortured and he was sentenced to death. He was saved from death by the arrival of the Red Army. As you may imagine, therefore, both wanted that past to be known. More precisely, Angel Wagenstein had been working in the forced labor battalions in Bulgaria, in southwest Bulgaria, the region precisely where Jews from northern Greece, a territory occupied by Bulgaria, were arrested, rounded up, and they transited through southwest Bulgaria before being deported. And he later wrote, packed in the open cars of the Demi-Hisar symmetrically narrow gauge railway, they crossed Bulgaria's old territories. Let me declare once again at this high forum that no German unit took part in that operation. I saw them at dawn, half naked and shivering on the open cars, some of them still in their nightgowns or underwear. So he wanted that to be known. But their commitment would not have been sufficient were it not for a third parameter, the time of Eastern European co-productions. These co-productions develop in the 1950s. Bulgaria makes the first movies with the Soviet Union in the early part of the decade, and the GDR will become one of its most important partners in the 1960s and 1970s. On the Bulgarian side, there is an attempt at achieving greater international recognition as a state where you do have artists, but also at acquiring some technical skills. On the part of the GDR, there is a quest for international recognition in Cannes, because the GDR is then not recognized as a German state and cannot compete in Cannes with its own name. Zvezdi was therefore presented as a Bulgarian film, in Cannes. If you read the archives but have little time, a lot of energy is spent on who is responsible for what segment of the movie and how can we make sure that Bulgarians will not be those who are outsourced to do technical work while the artistic dimensions would be East German. In the end, a film is being made. That film, though, and this is what I shall try to argue, is the result of two very different political agendas and two strikingly different identity dilemmas. Those identity dilemmas are the following. Bulgaria at the time, I'm talking about the Communist Party and also the leadership of the film production company, is intent on having one more anti-fascist movie that would build a master heroic narrative about the war. It is trying to boost the partisan movement and its image, in part, by the way, in relation to neighboring Yugoslavia, where you did have a very strong partisan movement, and you know the relationship between the two countries are a bit complicated in the 1950s. The GDR is facing a very different set of dilemmas. How can one be East German? That is, be German and socialist. Which kind of tie to the past do you need to have? Do you claim good as part of a common German heritage? Or where do you split? How do you relate continuity and discontinuities? This shows a lot in their internal studio discussions. Bulgarian side, Venelin Kotsev, whom I quote here, is going to be a famous ideological figure in the Bulgarian culture milieu. And what he wants to see in the movie is that Bulgaria is a victim of Nazism. So here's what he's saying. If one is to talk about the anti-fascist struggle during the war, it is important that the Bulgarian viewpoint on these issues be clearly known. In the movie, we do not sufficiently see the consequences of the fascist occupation of Bulgaria by German soldiers during those years. I remind you, for those who might have forgotten, that Bulgaria was an ally to Nazi Germany. In all too many scenes, Bulgarians and Germans seem to be coexisting nicely in good and mutual understanding. Second step. They also want to see a brilliant national past. So why make a movie on a Greek Jew and a German soldier? So here you have this particular melody of those discussions, which is very striking to listen to. So what lies at the heart of the film? The heart of the film, according to me, lies in the relationship between Worth and Walter. Between a Greek Jew and a German soldier? Why then make such a film? Nicola Merchev, Bulgarian Jews were not sent to Auschwitz. And Radevsky, also very much in line, we are making a film that contributes to the strengthening of brotherhood between Bulgaria and Germany. In other terms, our purpose is to be creating ties, Eastern European ties. Therefore, let's forget about the fact that they are not national Jews. Yet, perhaps we should insist on the fact that Bulgarians did have a liking for their co-fellows and a sense of fraternity. Here again, Venelin Kotsev. That a few individuals should be compassionate and help the victims of fascism, in this case a group of Jews that are to be sent to Poland, this is very nice, very dull, and quite insufficient. If we stick to that, we will never reach the educational effect we are looking for. And of course, what is even much more delicate in that East German-Bulgarian negotiation is who is responsible for the deportation? Radevsky. I'm sorry, this may sound strange to you, but we're commissioning Bulgarian and German filmmakers to produce a film on Greek Jews. But on these Jews, shouldn't our German comrades have made a film of their own? Why are we getting mixed up in all this? The East German participants in the meeting are always very soft and calm in their answers. Yet, Professor Welkening responds. In this movie, we also show the guilt of those who collaborated through the character of the Bulgarian chief police officer. For that reason, the film is of great significance to our Bulgarian friends too. And you do have an attempt at nonetheless insisting on the importance of discussion about the recent past in Bulgaria too, and not only in Germany. This leads to a second major disagreement. What are the Germans like? Can we think of a good German? What kind of a German could be good? And here we come with the notion of collective responsibility as defined by the Bulgarians. This Walter, the German officer who will join the partisan movement and belatedly oppose Nazi policies, is he really hostile to Hitler? Nikolai Mirchev. Why should he be pro-Hitler? Couldn't we say that all Germans were in favor of Hitler? Konrad Wolf, who is a filmmaker. Well, with regard to Walter, allow me to make one remark, since despite everything, we do have something in common with the German people and with German fascism. And we thought about what we made in a film, in an atmosphere like World War II, a person like Walter could not have existed. Konrad Wolf. And why, please? His destiny would have been different. Why? Because neither court, his captain, nor the Bulgarian fascist police would have let him evolve that way. Well, if this were the case, there would be no German Democratic Republic today. I do not share this opinion. I believe that in the former fascist army, there were people like Walter. What you see here, which is also a very painful and delicate moment, is some East German being aware of the existence of a German responsibility and yet arguing that it might be possible to distinguish between a Western capitalist Nazi Germany and some people who were committed to fighting against Nazism. In fact, the reason why the movie is made in East Germany precisely in those years is because it's part and parcel of an attempt at delegitimizing West Germany as a country facing restoration of fascism. It has to be known that there is a political rehabilitation of fascism. We need to fight with all possible means, and we believe that this film constitutes such a weapon. At the same time, Wolfgang Kohlhasser is very subtle and nuanced here again. There are people like Walter who are opposed to it. There are good people whose stomach hurts at the idea of what is being prepared. We must show them the past so that they understand that silence is a crime. So from this attempt at shaping a difficult common reading, as you see, no common reading of the war, of responsibilities for the Holocaust, and a tendency on the part of Bulgaria to try to elude any form of responsibility, can we still see some shared or circulating features? I decided to have screen captures of two moments of Zvezdi and Deveti Krug, because what you see are such symbols. At the beginning of Deveti Krug, the youngsters are playing, and you see images of barbed wires that will revert by the end of the movie. Similarly, in Zvezdi Sterne, you have common symbolization. These are elements that will be all recurring in most attempts at providing thematic images of the Holocaust. Yet, I was wondering, there has been much debate regarding the framework within that experience was portrayed. Very often, it was part and parcel of a stress on an anti-fascist struggle. Jewish victims were victims among others. There had been plenty. There was an attempt at insisting on brotherhood, unity in Yugoslavia, and insisting on what might be a shared experience of the war. In the case of Bulgaria, you did not have much of any reference to Jews, but for the communist good Jews. What is here striking is that if you look at the script of the movie, simply for pragmatic technical reason, something about the specific experience of the Jews appears, but in between the lines, the extras, they are Jews, in part brought from Sofia to be shot in Bansko and take part in the film. So what is officially denied comes in terms of the list of extras. In the case of Yugoslavia, Deveti Krug is much less a heroic movie about anti-fascist struggle. It's more based on individual. It has a greater sense of personal intimacy. So to a large extent, it shows a much more reflexive posture. Nonetheless, when director Franz Stieglitz is thanking for the Pula Prize that had been received, the presentation of the movie is here again subduing the Jewish component. The moving theme is about the destiny of a young love in the middle of the rage of World War II, and it's a counterpoint to the dark waves of inhumanity which we saw in the last war. So could it be, there is a brilliant dissertation by Emil Kereni on ways of commemorating the Holocaust, that there is some kind of attempt at being Yugoslav a Jewish way and finding a balance between both, or could it not be? But yet, the second common feature is even much more striking and has not been often emphasized. In those cases, you do have rather passive Jews, and the core of the movies are the non-Jewish male characters. The core of the movies are based on the moral dilemma of the male. Walter, the German officer, is not sensitive to the plight of the Jewish victims unless he falls in love. Similarly, what you see in Ivo is that he has a fake marriage that he does not want, and originally is a young boy who wishes to have a beautiful life. And through the movie, thanks to the passive, doomed victim, both males will become true men. Here, since I have only 1 minute left, I don't emphasize, but in the end, Walter goes to the Bulgarian resistance movement and says, you needed guns, and will decide to work with them. The last one, which is to me the most painful element about ways of representing the Holocaust, is the use of Christian symbols in order to portray the Holocaust. In the case of David Krug, here again it's very different. Nonetheless, I found this poster from 1961, a Polish poster, that is showing the film with a clear image of a cross. In the Bulgarian case, you do have the love of the two characters walking towards a church and being protected by a cross. During the discussions, in fact, there is an attempt at saying maybe it is wrong. Those who take part in discussions are for the most part Jews. Jews who are not expressing themselves nonetheless as Jews, but as communists. We should not be using religious symbols. And here again, you have an attempt at negotiating a way of saying maybe we should do it otherwise, but hardly any wish to emphasize a personal destiny and experience. So to conclude, what have we seen and how can we try to make sense of those two attempts? First and foremost, I've tried to emphasize the fact that when depicting the Holocaust, they are debating many other issues. They are debating what it means to be a German or Bulgarian, how you may understand long-term history, and how you can shape a socialist future. At the same time, though, there is the inception of an attempt at saying we should try to remember. And there's a tiny little sentence at the end of Zvezdi. The voiceover is saying nobody knew the name of Walter. This is why in our story we called him Walter. But you, turning to the public, you do remember those years, don't you? And that is the ending of the film. Thank you for your attention.
And now we will proceed with our tour through the Balkans, because we began with the comparative relation Yugoslavia-Bulgaria. Now we are moving to, I would say, heart of Bulgaria, due to Gergana Doncheva, who is at the Institute of the Bulgarian Academy for Arts and Science. Her main research interests are film studies, documentary film, contemporary history, and I'm very proud to say that she's also a very dear friend and colleague of mine, since she did part of her postdoctoral research on the memory of communism constructed in post-Yugoslav in new Bulgarian cinemas at the Belgrade Faculty of Drama Arts. She is going to talk about the topic entitled The Modest Presence of the Topic of the Holocaust and Jews in Bulgarian Cinema, Facts and Very Ambitiously Reasons.
At the beginning, I would like to express my special thanks to the organizers for their invitation, Professor Nevena Dakovic and Mr. Vladimir Ceric. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with all of you. And a special thanks to Nadège Ragaru, because I will continue where she stopped. The topic of the Holocaust has an ambivalent status in Bulgarian history and cultural memory. Generally speaking, it was a marginal theme treated carefully in accordance with the political context, but at the same time, the national narrative about the Bulgarian Jews' salvation was and still is one of the most popular stories, deeply entrenched in the collective imagination. What is more, the fact that almost 50,000 Jews survived in Bulgaria during the Second World War turned into a legitimate source of pride, blurring another important fact that 11,000 Jews from Aegean Thrace, Vardar Macedonia, and Pirot were annihilated in Treblinka in 1943. Before commenting the symptomatic representations of the Holocaust in Bulgarian cinema, I would like to make a brief overview on Bulgarian historiography and to outline the different discursive frameworks in which this event was presented. Not surprisingly, the cinematic treatments were widely influenced by the official historical interpretations, and the revision in the field of history in terms of the Jewish population from the so-called New Lands was followed by a revision in film. Since the end of the Second World War, the topic of the Holocaust presented in the academic research, but scholars were highly selective in their choice of facts. They put a special accent on the Jews' salvation, making suggestions that it was a victory achieved by the Bulgarian citizens and their leaders. The dominant topic about the Jews' salvation was closely connected with the process of establishing the image of Bulgaria as a country without anti-Semitism. The first book discussing the events in Aegean Thrace was a collection of documents published in 1945 by Nathan Greenberg. In his conclusion, Greenberg noted that the Bulgarian nation had not anti-Semitic sentiments, but he directly blamed the government in overt institutional anti-Semitism. In a long period of time, it was the only edition concerning the problem mentioned. After 1948, the 90% from the Jewish community left their homeland and settled down in Israel. The Jews who preferred to stay in Bulgaria were expected to demonstrate total loyalty to the new socialist power. As a result, the annual of the Jewish Cultural and Educational Organization was transformed in a forum where the myth about the contributions made by the activists of Bulgarian Communist Party had to be disseminated. The topic of the Holocaust was scarcely reconsidered in the next collection of documents that appeared in 1978, entitled The Struggle of the Bulgarian Nation for Defense and Salvation of the Jews Living in Bulgaria During the Second World War. Unlike other editions in which readers could not find out even a word about the events in Aegean Thrace and Vardar Macedonia, this collection included documents from the archive preserved in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem and from the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences archive. In historical research, two main theses were launched. The first one, Tsar Boris III bore the responsibility for the tragic deportation of Jews in the New Lands. This thesis was supported by the historians as Vladislav Topalov, Isidor Solomonov, and Ilcho Dimitrov. And the second one, the Bulgarian Communist Party, and especially its leader, Todor Zhivkov, organized the protest action, and later the Jews were saved thanks to this effort. It was wrote by Isidor Topalov. The historian Ilcho Dimitrov admitted that in the newly annexed region, Bulgarian state introduced its institutions such as army, police, legislation, court, and also he wrote that the deportation was prepared and committed by the Commissariat of the Jewish Matters, headed by Alexander Belev. But Dimitrov emphasized that the Jews from Aegean Thrace, Vardar Macedonia, and Pirot were Greek and Yugoslav subjects, and developing this argument in practice, he rejected the responsibility of Bulgarian authorities. The burning issue about the deportation was discussed in the book published by David Cohen, who expressed his opinion that the Bulgarians had not any idea about the sinister criminal operation. Because of that, they were not able to defend the Jews from the new land. After the turbulent changes in 1989, in the historiography emerged several concurrent interpretations. Firstly, Rehabilitation of the Tsar Boris III, Hristo Bojajev and Stefan Gruev alleged that the monarch did his best in order to preserve the Jews in Bulgaria and was put under enormous pressure by the German authorities. In such situation, he chose the lesser of the two evils, sacrificing the Jewish population in ancient Thrace and further Macedonia. As a whole, the deportation was mentioned barely, and these authors adopted the position that in March 1943, nobody knew anything about the secret Nazist plans. Alternatively, the narrative linked with the deportation appeared in some historical writings depicting Bulgarian as a disobedient ally. It was supported by Vitka Toshkova, Nikolai Kotev, Georgi Daskalov, and Dimitar Yonchev, and the problem concerning the responsibility traditionally was attributed to the Tsar Boris III and to the Prime Minister Bogdan Filov. However, the fundamental demarcation line, which divided scholars into two irreconcilable camps, was the evolution of the terminological usage of the majority of researchers continued to apply the notion salvation in their comments, but a smaller group was prone to replace it with the word survival. Or when these historians used the term salvation, they put salvation in quotation marks to indicate to the apologetic meaning of the word. These historians are Nikolai Pop-Petrov, Nadia Danova, Borislav Dichev, and Rumen Avramov. These researchers openly insisted on the necessity, the responsibility for the deportation to be clearly articulated and incorporated in the national historical narrative. In this sense, the collection History and Memory, Bulgaria Facing the Holocaust, edited by the journalist Emi Baruch, was really important in reference to the conceptualization of the key problems in the broader frameworks. For example, the sociologist Liliana Deyanova, in her text Post-Communist Negotiationism, arose the question about the appearance of negotiationism and shared her concern that emblematic name of the contradictionary French academic Robert Faurisson, notorious for being a Holocaust denier, circulated uncritically in Bulgarian context. In addition, she pointed out that the textbooks emphasized the dramatic events associated with the Jews' salvation, while the topic of the Holocaust is quite marginal. In the same collection were published the memories of the prominent veteran scriptwriter Angel Wagenstein about the deportation of the Jews. He was at his early 20s during the war, and on the basis of his personal experience, Wagenstein witnessed that in the operation did not participate a German soldier, but only Bulgarian ones and Bulgarian policemen. For the first time, the theme of the Holocaust was resurrected on the silver screen in 1959 when the movie Stars Zvezdi, directed by Konrad Uf, came out at the local cinema theaters. It was a co-production realized by Bulgaria and the German Democratic Republic. Angel Wagenstein wrote a script focused on the melodramatic story about the impossible love between the Jewish girl Ruth and a German officer Walter. In this cinematic representation, the Jewish personages were deprived of any concrete details in terms of their previous lives, and spectators did not learn where they were born, although one of the characters mentioned that today Greeks and Jews arrived at the camp. Many years later, Ivan Nichev, in his latest movie Bulgarian Rhapsody, quoted the final scene depicted in Stars, a train leaving for Auschwitz, and a running man who was not able to save his sweetheart. In the period of the state socialism, Jews and the representatives of other minority groups did not present often in films, and it was a matter of official ideology, the nation to be constructed visually as a homogeneous entity. In the rare cases when these restrictions imposed were violated, filmmakers predominantly turned their attention to the Turk or Pomak communities. Despite of this obvious tendency, in the late 80s, a movie Transports of Death devoted to the Bulgarian Jews' salvation appeared. It was a typical propaganda work in which the historical truth was selectively articulated in order to be glorified the communist leader Todor Živkov. The real revival of interest in Bulgarian cinema on the Jewish topic, however, sparked in the end of the 90s and afterwards. The most significant author who has a particular long-lasting preference for the theme of Holocaust and Jews is Ivan Nichev. Ivan Nichev made a trilogy of movies belonging to the mainstream film in which he narrated the story of Jewish protagonists connected with Bulgaria. The first one, After the End of the World, was a film shot in a retro style full of nostalgia and longing for the old days when in the multi-ethnic town Plovdiv, the members of the different religious and ethnic communities, Jews, Armenians, Greeks, and Bulgarians, live happily together. The director developed further his topic in the second production, Journey to Jerusalem, that casted light on the fate of Jewish children sent to their parents in Palestine in order to avoid the concentration camps and the inevitable death. The same theme was elaborated brilliantly by Kostadin Bonev in his documentary The Ships Are Full, probably the most mature and profound representation of the Holocaust in Bulgarian cinema up to date. The third work, entitled Bulgarian Rhapsody, whose working title was A Concert for Survivors, has a crucial significance because for the first time explicitly was depicted the dark-hashed episode from Bulgarian national history during the war. The movie provided more balanced perspective to the events in comparison with the treatment given by the Macedonian movie The Third Half. Ivan Nichev uses the genre conventions of melodrama in Bulgarian Rhapsody and consciously quoted the movie stars, creating the sense of continuity. In 1959, the scriptwriter Angel Wagenstein was not able even to hint that the people deported to Poland were Jews from the ancient race, Vardar, Macedonia, and Pirot. Nichev worked with Wagenstein on their common project After the End of the World, and this fact provoked me to think that Bulgarian Rhapsody was made under the influence of this veteran. He's still alive in his middle 90s, and the film could be considered as a symbolic gesture of atonement in Bulgarian public space. Undoubtedly, the most ambitious and broadly discussed cinematic project was the TV series The Ungiven, produced by the Bulgarian State Television on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of the Bulgarian Jews' salvation. In the media, the film was announced as Bulgarian response to the Macedonian The Third Half, and spectators expected eagerly its premiere in the spring of 2013. As a whole, the reception of the series was quite unfavorable in two general directions, in terms of its historical authenticity and in terms of its artistic merit. Severally criticized, the scriptwriter Emil Bonev gave in-depth interview explaining that every detail in his story was built up on the documents, and he could not understand the pretension openly expressed by the Bulgarian Jews living in Israel, who were disappointed about the interpretation of Liliana Panica, the secretary of the Commissioner Alexander Belev, with serious contribution to the Bulgarian Jews' salvation. In reference to it, it's worth noting the unforgettable performance of Dimitar Banenkin in the role of Alexander Belev, represented as a strong, decisive, and very complicated person. However, the discursive treatment in The Ungiven follows the well-known narrative pattern to be emphasized, the act of salvation, but another half of the truth remains in the shadows again. In conclusion, I would like to say that the lack of representation depicting the Holocaust in Bulgarian cinema stemmed from the fact that in the territory of the national memory, the narrative about the deportation of the Jews from the new lands, as Nadia Danova wrote, touches the issue of the national auto-stereotype about the tolerance as a specific feature of Bulgarian people. But the appearance of the films like Bulgarian Rhapsody makes me believe that Bulgarian society is mature enough to accept the past in all aspects and to reconcile with it.
thank you for this wonderful insight into the Bulgarian cinema, and just not to leave the Stern and the Night Circle as the only point of relation. It just occurred to me that on the road to Jerusalem, in fact, there are certain resemblance with the Balkan Express, because also they are hiding their Jewish girl, they are accidental heroes of the, I don't know how to say, not revolution, but anti-fascist struggle and so on, so perhaps something worth exploring. And now from Bulgaria we go directly to Macedonia, and now we have work of two authors. So let me present you first the one in the shadow, so to say. At the moment, Loreta Georgievska, who is a full-time professor at the Institute for Macedonian Literature, and her specific areas of research interest include cultural studies, Macedonian comparative literature, theater literature, media and gender studies. She is the author of many books, and she is the member of many European research groups and projects. The other who is going actually to present in this case is also Professor Mishel Pavlovski, sorry, from the Institute for Macedonian Literature of St. Cyril and Methodius University in Skopje. He teaches cultural studies, topics and methods, post-colonial theory, as well as theater and its audience. So from two different perspectives, they are going to present about the Holocaust Museum Skopje and also refer to cinema, since this edifice features prominently in Darko Mitrevsky third hall.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, distinguished chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, let me first express great pleasure. Loreta Georgievska and me have to be a part of this project, if I can say that. As partners to Jagoda and Vlada, as well as presenters and presenters here. And I think that it will be great pleasure, and we are both eager to see the printed and the full version of papers presented here. I will start with the statement from Alvin Rosenfeld in The End of the Holocaust. The image of the Holocaust is a changing one, and just how it is changing, who is changing it, and what the consequences of such change may be are matters that need to be carefully and continually pondered. Rosenfeld explains his view, quoted about with several controversial points, if I can say so. They are, I would say, provocative primarily because of the absolute and ultimate nature of the historical discourse he stands for. Rosenfeld states, 1. Knowledge acquired not from historians, but rather from novelists, filmmakers, playwrights, poets, television programs writers, producers, museum exhibits, popular newspapers and magazines, internet websites, the speeches and ritual performances of political figures and other public personalities and the like. Second, thus the history of the Holocaust that is made available to most people most of the time is largely a product of popular culture. And third, the public at large remains readily drawn by the specter of the Holocaust and is consequently a receptive audience for stories and images of the Third Reich. In some, he states, the image of the Holocaust is continually being transfigured, and the several stages of its transfiguration, which one can trace through popular culture, may contribute to a fictional subversion of the historical sense rather than a firm consolidation of accurate, variable knowledge. One result of such a development may be an incipient rejection of the Holocaust as it actually was rather than its incorporation by and retention in historical memory. Although Rosenfeld places the museum exhibition outside the historical discourse, the memorial center in Skopje engaged the senses and causes emotional sensation which are as strong as the historical facts. Let's see how it does that. So we will try to make here a virtual tour to the Memorial Center in Skopje, or how emotional sensations can have the strength of historical facts, or maybe even more. Memorial Center for the Jews of Macedonia is opened on March 10, 2011, with a transfer of 3 urns with ashes from Treblinka concentration camp, the destination to which 7,148 Macedonian Jews were deported and killed in 1943. And this is The urns arrived in Macedonia in 1961 and were exhibited in Bitola, Skopje and Štip. And it is the 4th memorial center in the world dedicated to Holocaust victims, after the Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, and the Jewish Museum in Berlin. Authors of the architectural design are Mirko Andonovski and Nikola Boško, consultants Mimoza Tomic and Jasmika Namicheva, and associate is Alexander Andonovski. And the Memorial Center is located in the former Jewish district in Skopje. Before the war, Jewish district in Skopje, just not far from the river of Vardar. Let's leave Skopje for a moment and move to Germany, to the Jewish Museum of Berlin. The author, the Polish Jewish architect Daniel Liebeskind, developed the project around 3 key concepts. 1, highlight the importance of intellectual, cultural, and economic contribution of the Jewish citizens of Berlin. 2, meet the need to integrate the meaning of the Holocaust into the consensus and the memory of the city of Berlin, and acknowledge and incorporate the erasing of Berlin's Jewish life. Skopje's Memorial Center has a much humbler goal: to document the Holocaust of Macedonian Jews, i.e. to turn the former Jewish neighborhood into a place of memory. To paraphrase Nora, who says that what makes them places of memory is precisely that by which they escape from history, we shall conclude that the Memorial Center in Skopje is a temple of the memory of one night that marked the beginning of destruction of more than 7,000 lives. That is, its function as a memorial falls within what Plate says: while traditional museums archive memory, memorials ritualize remembrance. Officially, the concept of the Memorial Center is defined in the brochure published by the Holocaust Fund of the Jews from Macedonia. And the first point in the concept is that the Memorial Center is divided into 4 functional units, reflecting the events preceding the disastrous night of the deportation of the Jews from Macedonia to concentration camp Treblinka. It reminds me on the movie script that in all the movie you have one night. In all the museum you have one night. And museum tour. Main entrance with multi-purpose hall and permanent exhibition as an introduction to the events, followed by documentary materials and the names of the victims. The artistic installation that greets the visitor creatively unveils the function of a monument and an office of archives and records. The digital picture frames going on and off in sequences present screens with photographs and the names of the victims. It is a symbolic representation of the passage of life that can last only in our memories. After the installation, the urns with the ashes of Macedonian Jews that perished in Treblinka are exhibited in a separated room. In the ground floor, to the left of the entrance, are the film screening room and the souvenir shop. The main hall is used for exhibitions dedicated to the Holocaust and the history of Macedonian Jews. Probably the most valuable object in the memorial center is the original rail car used in deportation of the Macedonian Jews. It is the original rail car and it was found in Sofia, Bulgaria. If we go up one floor, in the first floor is dedicated to the life of the Sephardic Jews after their expulsion from Spain in the late Middle Ages and their contributions to the society and to the spiritual, cultural, and artistic life of the Jewish community, which, as one of the more influent, was involved in the social life all over Europe. Here, in the section of the Memorial Center, which is used for exhibitions dedicated to the history of the Jews, screenings of documentary films or historical subjects, we shall interrupt our tour of the Memorial Center and shall offer a brief recollection of the history of Jews in Macedonia. Really very brief and very basic. The first Jews arrived to Macedonia at the time of the Roman Empire, escaping the persecution in Israel. The oldest sign of Jewish presence in Macedonia is the synagogue found in the ancient town of Skopje, not far from Skopje, dated to the 3rd century BC. The second wave of Jewish immigration to the Balkans, including Macedonia, happened in the 15th century, with Jews coming mostly from Spain and Portugal. And the third wave of Jewish immigration to Macedonia was registered in the late 19th century. During that wave, it was mostly Polish, German, and Russian Jews escaping the growing anti-Semitism in those countries that arrived to Macedonia. In Macedonia, let me one lyric sentence, anti-Semitism has had no success or tradition. There are no documents mentioning significant anti-Semitic incidents. The Jewish characters are not burdened with negative stereotypes in Macedonian folklore, and there is no noticeable anti-Semitic sentiment in Macedonian arts. The deportation of Jews from Macedonia was organized by the governments of fascist Bulgaria and Nazi Germany. The deportation of Macedonian Jews was a part of the projects to deport the Jews from all newly liberated Bulgarian lands. That is a phrase which was used in 1941 from the part of Macedonia, Thracia, and part of Serbia, i.e. the territories occupied by fascist Bulgaria with German help. All Jews from Macedonia were deported to Treblinka, that camp, perished in its gas chambers. Not a single soul returned from Treblinka. No witness survived to tell the horrific story of the annihilation of the Jewish community of Macedonia. Documents are the only remaining witnesses of the fate of Macedonian Jews. Of the total of 11,400 Jews deported from the occupied territories, 7,148 Jews were deported from the territory of today's Republic of Macedonia. The deportation was a tragic success. According to the October 1945 data, there were just 419 Jewish people left on the territory of today Macedonia. Bulgaria started adopting a set of anti-Semitic laws in July 1940. In January 1941, it adopted the law of protection of the nation. In March 1941, Bulgaria entered an alliance with the Axis powers. The implementation of the law of protection of the nation paid special attention to Chapter 4 on the property of the person of Jewish descent and Chapter 5 on the professional and economic activities of the persons of Jewish descent. The law listed all possible professions that were off limits for Jews, limiting their opportunities to earn a decent living. The cure and the systematic liquidation of the Jews within the borders of the then Third Bulgarian Empire started with the denial of their basic civil rights. The Bulgarians started implementing the law from the very start of the occupation of Macedonia. There are records of April 9, 1941, that all Jewish houses, retail, and craft shops in Bitola were marked. And now we are going to the second floor of the museum, back to the museum. The second floor is dedicated exclusively to the Holocaust, from the moment of the deportation to the events at Treblinka and the events in Poland in general. During the Second World War, there were 7 Nazi concentration camps in Poland in which several million people were killed. This is a more modest exhibit, consisting mostly of panels with reproductions. Still, it formally fits in the declared policy of the Memorial Center, which is according to the official brochure. This is kind of idea how the museum it will be officially. Part 2, connecting the memory of the toponym of David Street in peacetime, then painful expectations, the disastrous night and the silence, short stay at the Skopje tobacco factory and transport to the camp of death. In this part, the history and culture of the Jews from Macedonia will be presented as an exhibition through archaeological, ethnological and other kinds of museum exhibits. Part 3, people is an indestructible category. Survivors of the Jewish community with great optimism and strong will involve themselves into the resistance movement until evil was conquered. The third part, placed in a third level, is a space for research, scientific analysis and education. And part 4, office entrance etc. It will, some of these ideas are done and some shall be done. The Holocaust and popular culture, an example. The feature film Third Half, directed by Darko Mitrovsky, said with strong and fierce reaction in Bulgaria. On the other hand, it was greeted enthusiastically in Macedonia. And the third half is deeply moving. This is official announcement for third half. The third half is deeply moving, life-affirming, and often humorous story of love during wartime and country's passion for soccer. In 1941, Macedonia, a young Eastern Orthodox Costa and a wealthy young Jewish Roman Rebecca fall in love despite her father's effort to keep them apart. With the war raging around their borders, Macedonians remain cocooned in their world of patriotic pleasures, primarily concerned about getting the Macedonia Football Club on a winning position. Their managers hires the legendary German Jewish coach Rudolf Spitz to turn them into champions. But then the Nazi occupation begins and they start deporting Jews. Costa and his teammates realize that the carefree days of their youth are over, as the Nazis tries to sabotage the outcome of the championship game and Spitz's life is threatened. Costa and his teammates rise to the challenge and protect their coach, with all of Macedonian cheering them on. And this is an official trailer of the movie. Our tour ends. The Museum of the Holocaust of Jews in Macedonia wasn't designed with such grand ambitions like the Berlin's museum, and it certainly doesn't have such economic resources available. It lacks that exclusive exhibits and artifacts like the Jerusalem Museum, and it doesn't have the grand research facilities of the American Memorial Center. Still, entering the Memorial Center in Skopje, one enters a narrative that is not less relevant in the context of historical discourse. The presentation of the Holocaust in this place of memory and remembrance produced by popular culture is sad, disturbing, and stirs up emotions. To go back to plate, the exhibition ritualizes remembrance. It means that we can question Rosenfeld's view that popular culture changes the understanding and the views of the Holocaust. The history, aiming at objective presentation of facts, doesn't engage the emotions in the same way the art does, or as popular culture does. It is either the film or the museum exhibition. One proof of that is the installation that greets us at the very entrance of the Memorial Center. That event more is true of the rail car, which, as a part of museum exhibition, loses its actual meaning and gains new symbolic value. It pulls us into the story, demanding our reaction, just as we will not be indifferent after we watch Mitrevsky's The Third Half. The facts, together with the visual impressions, the museum exhibits that etch into our memory as concrete pictures, not some form of abstractions, are an effective way to keep memory alive, to know and to prevent history from repeating. And of course, at the end, thank you.
Thank you to our dear presenters, since we managed to get back to some time.